Imagine this. You are 17 years old. Your brothers, the people who were supposed to protect you, grab you, strip off your coat, and throw you into a pit. Then they sell you for 20 pieces of silver. That is the price of a slave. That is what your family decided you were worth. And here is the worst part: you did nothing wrong. You were faithful. You were obedient. You told the truth. You brought a good report to your father. You did everything right, and you still ended up in a pit. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to sit with that for a moment, because many of you watching this video right now are in your pit. Maybe it is not a physical pit. Maybe it is a career that stalled after you gave everything to it. Maybe it is a business that collapsed despite your best efforts. Maybe it is a betrayal by people you trusted. Friends, family, colleagues, a partner. People who knew your heart and still walked away. If that is you, this video was made for you. Because what Joseph did between the pit and the palace is one of the most sophisticated displays of leadership, wealth psychology, and boardroom intelligence in all of human history. And by the end of this video, you will have a blueprint. Not a motivation speech. A blueprint. Something you can actually use. Stay with me. Let us set the scene properly, because the context of Joseph's story is everything. Joseph was the 11th of 12 sons born to Jacob, also known as Israel, a wealthy patriarch and livestock owner in ancient Canaan, what we today call Israel and the Palestinian territories. This story takes place around 1700 BC, roughly 3,700 years ago. But I want you to notice something. It reads like a story from last week. Jacob was a man of significant wealth by ancient standards. He owned large herds of livestock, had multiple wives, and commanded a substantial household. But he made one catastrophic parenting mistake that still destroys families today. He had a favorite, and he showed it openly. Joseph was Rachel's firstborn, and Rachel was the wife Jacob had loved and worked 14 years to marry. When Joseph was born, Jacob transferred that love, openly, visibly, in front of everyone, onto the boy. He gave him an ornate robe. Some translations call it the coat of many colors. In the ancient Near East, a robe like that was not just clothing. It was a status symbol. It was the garment of someone who did not do manual labor. It said, "This boy is being groomed for leadership. This boy is different from the rest of you." His brothers noticed, and they hated him for it. Now, Joseph also had dreams. Real dreams, the kind that, in the ancient world, were understood as divine communications. And in his youth, Joseph made another mistake. He told his brothers about the dreams. He dreamed that their sheaves of grain bowed down to his sheaf. He dreamed that the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed to him. Even his father rebuked him for the second one. But the Bible records that Jacob kept the matter in mind. His brothers, they had heard enough. One day, Jacob sent Joseph alone to check on his brothers who were tending flocks in a distant field. This was a journey of several days. And when his brothers saw him coming from a distance, they saw the coat, they saw the dreamer, and they made a decision. Originally, the plan was to kill him. Reuben, the oldest, intervened, suggesting they throw him into a dry cistern instead, planning to rescue him later. But before Reuben could act, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed by. Judah suggested selling him instead. 20 pieces of silver. Joseph was sold into slavery. They took his coat, they dipped it in goat's blood, and they brought it to their father Jacob, who tore his clothes in grief and mourned his son for years. And Joseph, he was taken to Egypt. Egypt in 1700 BC was arguably the greatest civilization on earth. The pyramids at Giza were already ancient. The empire stretched across North Africa. The Nile Delta produced enough grain to feed an empire. And the pharaoh who ruled Egypt commanded an economy and military that dwarfed anything in the ancient world. Joseph arrived not as a visitor, not as a guest, as a slave. He was purchased by a man named Potiphar, a high-ranking Egyptian official, specifically described as the captain of the guard. This means Potiphar was in military intelligence. He worked directly for Pharaoh. He was not a minor official. Joseph had been purchased into the household of one of the most powerful men in the country. And now here is where Joseph's character begins to reveal itself in extraordinary ways. He did not sulk. He did not shut down. He did not perform minimally, do just enough to survive and dream about escape. He worked. He worked with excellence. He worked with integrity. He worked as if the slave position was his own business. And God was with him. The Bible records something remarkable. Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph and that everything he did prospered in his hands. A foreign slave's God was visible to an Egyptian official, not because Joseph was preaching, because Joseph was producing. Potiphar promoted him. Eventually, he put Joseph in charge of his entire household. Every servant, every asset, every account. He trusted him so completely that the Bible says he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Think about that trajectory, from slave to chief of staff in one household. That is remarkable, but it was only Act 1, because then Potiphar's wife noticed Joseph. She made advances. Joseph refused, and she was not subtle about her feelings. She pursued this daily, and every day Joseph declined. His reason was not merely practical. He said, "How could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" He was not just managing consequences. He was protecting his conscience. One day, when the house was empty, she grabbed his garment. He ran, leaving the garment in her hand, and she used it. She accused him of attempted assault. The garment, the physical evidence, was in her hand. Potiphar had Joseph thrown into prison. Now here is where most people would have broken. Joseph had done everything right. He had been the model employee. He had protected his employer's honor. He had refused what was being offered freely. And his reward was a prison cell. Second betrayal. Second pit. Different walls, same injustice. But in prison, Joseph did exactly what he had done in Potiphar's house. He worked. He served. He showed up. The prison warden noticed and put him in charge of all the other prisoners. This man rises to the top everywhere he is placed. Not because circumstances cooperate, because his character is the constant. Then come the two men who will change everything. Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker were thrown into the same prison on the same night. They both had dreams that disturbed them deeply, and Joseph, who had the God-given ability to interpret dreams, asked them a question that changed the trajectory of his life. "Why do you look so sad today?" That question, that simple act of noticing people around him, of staying emotionally present even while suffering, opened the door to his destiny. He interpreted the baker's dream. He would be executed in 3 days. He interpreted the cupbearer's dream. He would be restored to his position in 3 days. He asked one thing in return. "When you are restored, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh." 3 days later, both interpretations came true exactly as Joseph had said. And the cupbearer forgot him. 2 more years passed. Joseph sat in prison, a man whose prophetic gift had proven accurate to the day, who had done everything right, who had served faithfully at every station, and he was forgotten. Then Pharaoh had dreams. 2 dreams that disturbed him so much he gathered all the wise men and magicians of Egypt, the greatest intellectual class in the ancient world, and none of them could interpret what he had seen. The cupbearer remembered. Finally, he told Pharaoh, "There is a young Hebrew man in the prison who interpreted my dream and the baker's dream, and everything he said came exactly true." Joseph was brought from the dungeon. He was shaved, given new clothes, and stood before Pharaoh. Pharaoh told him the dreams. 7 fat cows devoured by 7 thin cows. 7 full heads of grain swallowed by 7 thin, wind-blasted heads. Joseph said, "The 2 dreams are one." God is showing Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of extraordinary abundance, followed by 7 years of devastating famine. The famine will be so severe it will consume all the abundance that came before. Then Joseph did something extraordinary. He was not asked for advice. He was asked to interpret. But Joseph went further. He gave Pharaoh a strategy. Find a discerning and wise man. Appoint him over all Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, collect 1/5 of all grain and store it in cities. When the famine comes, you will have the reserves. Pharaoh looked at his officials. He said, Can we find anyone like this man? One in whom is the Spirit of God? He turned to Joseph. He said, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Joseph was 30 years old, 13 years after being thrown in a pit. He went from dungeon to number 2 in the greatest empire on earth, in a single day. He was given Pharaoh's signet ring, robes of fine linen, a gold chain around his neck. He rode in the second royal chariot with people shouting before him, "Make way," and he got to work. 7 years of abundance, and Joseph collected grain. Not some, not a percentage. He collected so much that, after a while, he stopped measuring it because it was beyond measure. City by city, he built the most sophisticated food reserve system the ancient world had ever seen. Then the famine came, and it was not just Egypt that suffered. The famine covered the entire ancient Near East, and people came from every nation to buy grain from Egypt, because only Egypt had enough. Back in Canaan, Joseph's brothers were starving. Jacob sent them to Egypt to buy grain, and they came, 10 brothers, and bowed before the Egyptian official in charge of food distribution. They bowed down with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized them immediately. They did not recognize him. He was now in his mid-30s, dressed as an Egyptian official, speaking through interpreters. The boy they had thrown in a pit was now the man deciding whether they ate. He tested them. He watched to see. Had they changed? Were they still the men who could sell their own brother? Eventually, Judah, the very brother who had suggested selling Joseph, stepped forward and offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. Joseph could not restrain himself any longer. He cleared the room of all Egyptians, and he wept so loudly that the entire Egyptian household heard him. He said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers could not answer him. They were terrified, and Joseph said, "Come close to me. Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." He looked at 13 years of betrayal, suffering, imprisonment, and injustice, and he reframed the entire narrative. He saw the hand of God in the hand of his enemies. He understood that the path to the palace ran through the pit. He provided for his entire family. He settled them in the best land in Egypt, Goshen. He brought his father Jacob, who wept on his neck for a long time. And Jacob said, "Now I can die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Leadership value. What leadership value applies to us today? Here is what the story of Joseph teaches us about leadership. And these are principles that apply whether you are leading a team of 2 or a company of 2,000. Leadership Principle 1. Your character is your constant. Your circumstances are not. Joseph was in 4 radically different environments in 13 years. Privileged home, a slave household, prison, palace. In every single one, his character produced the same outcome. He rose to the top. He was put in charge. He was trusted. The modern leadership lesson here is profound. Stop waiting for better circumstances to demonstrate better leadership. The way you lead in the pit is the way you will lead in the palace. The habits, the integrity, the excellence you build when nobody is watching, that is what carries you when the audience arrives. Leadership Principle 2. Emotional intelligence is a leadership superpower. Joseph's question to the cupbearer and baker, "Why do you look so sad today?" is a masterclass in emotional presence. He was in prison. He had his own problems. He had every right to be consumed by his own suffering. Instead, he noticed the people around him. He stayed attuned to others. This is the hallmark of transformational leaders. They create psychological safety. They notice when people are struggling. They ask the question that no one else asks. And in doing so, they build the kind of loyalty and trust that mundane management never achieves. Leadership Principle 3. Vision without strategy is just dreaming. Joseph did not just interpret Pharaoh's dream. He delivered a strategy. He could have done the minimum, answered the question he was asked, and let Pharaoh's officials figure out the rest. Instead, he presented a comprehensive plan. Identify a qualified administrator, create a taxation and storage system, build city-based reserves, prepare for 7 years ahead. Leaders who only react to the present will always be behind it. Leaders who see 7 years ahead and build systems for what is coming before it arrives are the ones who hold empires together when the famine hits. Leadership Principle 4. Forgiveness is a leadership decision, not just an emotional one. When Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, he made an active choice not to lead from revenge. He had the power, he had the position, he had every moral justification, but he understood that leading from bitterness destroys the leader. The energy required to maintain a posture of revenge is energy that cannot be used to build. He did not minimize what happened. He did not pretend the betrayal did not occur. He reframed it at the highest level. God sent me here. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. The leaders who build lasting organizations are the ones who can separate the wound from the work. They process the pain, but they do not let it poison the mission. Wealth building value. What wealth building value does this story show us? Now let us talk about wealth, and what Joseph's story reveals about how wealth is actually built. Wealth Principle 1. The ability to interpret information correctly is the most valuable economic skill on earth. Joseph's gift was interpretation. He could look at a dream and extract its meaning. But in modern terms, this is exactly what the most successful investors, entrepreneurs, and economists do. They read signals, market signals, demographic shifts, geopolitical trends that others cannot decode. And they act on those interpretations before the mainstream catches up. Warren Buffett's entire fortune is built on this one skill: reading economic information correctly when others are reading it incorrectly. He bought when others were selling because he could interpret the signal differently. Joseph told Pharaoh what was coming 7 years before it arrived. The wealth implication is clear. Those who see the famine coming during the feast are the ones who have reserves when the feast ends. Wealth Principle 2. Abundance management is more important than abundance acquisition. During the 7 years of plenty, Joseph collected grain systematically and stored it strategically, city by city, distributed, organized. He did not consume the surplus. He captured it. This is the foundational error of most people who earn well. They treat surplus income as a spending expansion rather than a strategic reserve. They upgrade their lifestyle during every season of plenty and have nothing left when the famine arrives. Joseph's economic model was create a reserve rate of 20%. 1/5 of all produce in the good years. That percentage, 20%, is still cited by modern financial planners as the foundational savings rate for wealth building. Wealth Principle 3. Control the strategic asset, and you control the economy. Egypt did not become wealthy during the famine by having more gold. It became wealthy by having more grain, the one resource that every nation needed to survive. Egypt became the economic hub of the ancient world because it controlled the irreplaceable commodity. In modern terms, the wealthiest individuals and organizations in history have understood this principle. Control the oil. Control the internet infrastructure. Control the payment rails. Control the land. Control the platform through which others must access what they need. What is your grain? What asset, skill, relationship, or system do you control that gives others access to something they cannot live without? Wealth Principle 4. Generational wealth requires a long-term vision. Joseph's plan was not for that year. It was for a 14-year cycle, 7 of plenty and 7 of famine. He thought in decades. And when the famine came, not just Egypt but entire nations survived because one man had thought beyond the current season. Most people manage money in weeks. The wealthy manage it in years. The extraordinarily wealthy think in decades and generations. Joseph's economic legacy lasted for hundreds of years. It was the grain reserves he built that enabled the Israelite people to survive and grow in Egypt, setting the stage for the next chapter of biblical history. Boardroom value. What boardroom value can we extract from this story? Now let us bring this into the boardroom. What specific executive and organizational lessons can we extract from Joseph? Boardroom Lesson 1. How you handle being overlooked determines how far you go when you are seen. In most organizations, there is a talent gap. Highly capable people sit in roles below their capability through circumstance, bias, timing, or politics. The ones who rise are rarely the ones who perform loudly in frustration. They are the ones who perform at the highest possible level within their current scope, build an irrefutable track record, and become undeniable. Joseph never had a CV. He never had a LinkedIn profile. He never had a sponsor in the traditional sense. What he had was a reputation for results that preceded him in every environment. When the cupbearer finally remembered him, the testimony was simple. I saw him interpret a dream, and it came true exactly as he said. The boardroom application. Do not let your frustration at being undervalued show in the quality of your work. Instead, build a record so clear, so documented, so irrefutable that when the moment comes, and the moment always comes, you cannot be overlooked. Boardroom Lesson 2. The best time to give advice is immediately after demonstrating competence. Joseph did not walk into Pharaoh's throne room and offer strategic advice on Egyptian grain policy. He was asked to interpret a dream. He interpreted it brilliantly, and having proven his competence in the specific task he was asked to do, he then offered the unsolicited strategic recommendation. This sequencing is critical. In boardrooms and executive meetings, people who offer opinions before they have demonstrated competence are dismissed. But people who demonstrate extraordinary insight in their specific area and then extend it into broader organizational thinking, those are the people who get promoted into roles they were never formally considered for. Prove the skill first, then expand the scope. Boardroom Lesson 3. Crisis leadership requires both vision and systems. When the famine came, Egypt did not just survive because Joseph had predicted it. Egypt thrived because he had built a distribution system across every city, with local storage facilities, administrative oversight, and a pricing model that ultimately centralized all the land in Egypt under Pharaoh's control. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered operational response to a crisis that had been anticipated years in advance. The lesson for boards and executives. Crisis resilience is not built during the crisis. It is built in the planning cycles before it. The organizations that navigate recessions, pandemics, market disruptions, and supply chain failures are the ones that ran the scenario, built the reserve, and established the system while others were enjoying the boom. Boardroom Lesson 4. When you have power, use it to elevate, not to retaliate. When Joseph's brothers came to him, he had the most legitimate case for institutional retaliation in all of ancient history. They had robbed him of his freedom, his family, his youth, and his potential for 13 years. He had the positional authority and the political backing to ruin them entirely. Instead, he used his position to secure the best available land for his family, Goshen, the most fertile region of Egypt, and to sustain them through the famine. The boardroom principle. Leaders who use positions of power to pursue personal vendettas, however justified, ultimately destroy their credibility, their culture, and their legacy. The leaders who endure are the ones who use power generatively. They ask, who can I lift? Who can I position? How do I use what I have been given to create outcomes beyond myself? Nelson Mandela walked out of Robben Island after 27 years and chose national reconciliation. Joseph walked out of an Egyptian dungeon and chose family restoration. The scale is different. The principle is identical. Modern application. So let us bring this home. What do you actually do with this? There are 3 questions I want you to sit with after this video ends. Question 1. What is your pit, and are you performing in it, or are you waiting to be rescued from it? The pit is not the problem. The problem is what you decide to do while you are in it. Joseph built his reputation in the pit. His character in the prison is what made him credible in the palace. If you are in a season of constraint right now, a difficult job, a business in a hard place, a relationship that has broken down, a financial season that feels suffocating, the question is not when will this end? The question is who am I becoming while it lasts? Question 2. Where is your grain and are you storing it? Joseph identified the strategic resource, built the system to capture it, and created the reserve before the famine arrived. What is your equivalent of grain, your primary skill, income stream, or asset? And are you managing it like Joseph or consuming it like the seasons before him? The 7 years of plenty are not a reward. They are a preparation window. Question 3. Who in your life needs you to use your position to lift them, and have you been too wounded to do it? Joseph could not pour into his brothers from a position of bitterness. He had to work through the emotion privately before he could act generously publicly. But he got there. And when he did, the outcome was not just personal healing, it was the preservation of an entire lineage. Your greatest act of leadership may not be in your company. It may be in your family. It may be in the community where you grew up. It may be in the person you have been refusing to forgive. The pit to the palace is a journey, and you are on it right now. If this video gave you something real, not just inspiration but something to think with, please share it. Tag someone who needs the Joseph story today. Send it to someone in their pit. Subscribe to the Bible Wealth channel. Every week we go deep into one biblical story and extract the leadership principles, the wealth principles, and the boardroom principles that apply to your life today. Whether you are a CEO, a founder, an employee building your way up, or someone who has just been thrown in a pit and does not know what to do next, hit the notification bell and drop a comment below. Tell me, what is your pit right now? I read every single one. And next week, we are going into the story of King Solomon and what $2 trillion worth of wisdom actually looks like. See you then.